Maybe you found this video if you're struggling with sales in your business. Maybe you found this video if you're struggling with sales in general. You feel difficult when you ask the awkward questions. When objections come up, you go into fight or flight mode. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to break down the exact process that I've created, that I teach hundreds of students on how they can get to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50k a month without getting any objections. And when they do get objections, because it does happen from time to time, they are comfortable to just sit in the pocket and let it fucking rock and roll. So this is officially identity shifting for beginners. This process alone has made me over $40,000 a month personal income. This has cleared me over $2.7 million in cash collected in 12 months. So listen closely, motherfucker. So identity shifting, how do you do it? Because you will have watched the internal mastery system, I imagine. If you haven't, go and watch it. It's the last video that I posted on my channel. The next part after you've mastered yourself is mastering everybody else. So why do you do this? Because people buy who they want to be much more than they buy a fucking program. Because when they can imagine a version of them that achieves everything that they want and they just see the program as the vehicle to get them there, it makes the barrier to entry a lot lower. It makes the resistance a lot easier to combat, and they're just like boom, 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 ready to rock and roll. So key concepts that you'll need to understand: exactly how to stretch the gap, the concept of leaning out like a dance, the future pacing, the thread pulling, and you need to understand the psychology behind the internal limitations. I've spent the last 12 months studying and mastering this process. Am I a master at it? Absolutely not. But definitely on the fucking way there. So why do you need to understand this? Because your prospects need to have a big enough reason to step through fear, to step through uncertainty. Because if they had no internal limitations, what would they do? They would already be in the position that they want to be. So the most important part is for you to now understand exactly that you need to help them get through the fear. If the gap isn't big enough, they're not going to do it. So you need to be qualified at stretching a gap, not of external, but an internal gap, helping them understand who they want to be and why it is that they're not there. And you need to help them understand the pain in between that fucking huge gap that you're able to create by pulling the thread, leaning out, future pacing, and making sure that you understand the internal limitation that they've got in their mind. So the one thing that is going to be super crucial in your ability to articulate yourself in the right way is your mindset on the call. You need to be primed. You need to be ready. You need to be present, because your internal state determines how you perceive things. You find what you look for. So if you're looking for reasons as to why this prospect's going to be difficult to close, guess what you're going to find? Reasons as to why it's going to be difficult to close. If you look for reasons as to how you struggle to ask deeper questions, you're never going to ask the deeper questions. But if you look for the opportunities to take the conversation deeper, pull the threads so that they can become open to having a deep conversation, you're going to have a much better conversation overall. The best mindset that I've found to operate on these calls is to assume the close and to correct any language that doesn't serve that close. I'll give you a very brief example. Okay, how much money do you need to make to be able to provide for your mum? About 10k a month. Okay, I mean, do you believe that you can get there? Yeah, I think I can. I think I can. Are you going to be able to close? I think I can. Absolutely not. So you need to be able to correct that language and get them to commit to using more certain language themselves through the mindset that they use. So then you have to understand the mindset that causes that language to happen. The mindset that causes the uncertain language, because that is the most important part. How to identify the identity. A bit of a tongue twister. So is no scripts, no word tracks, just a fucking direction of where you want to take the call. Some might call it a framework, others might just say, Jack, you're a fucking G. How you identify the identity is through the language and through the words that they use. So the way that I like to do this is go future, current, past. And I'll show you exactly why. So the future, this is where pulling threads comes in handy. So what I always do is start off with a strong frame question of like, what's the biggest desire? What's the biggest motivation? What is the true internal why behind them getting the outcome of the program? If you're a fitness coach, you'd be like, what is the true motivation behind you getting in the best shape of your life? That way they can't just say, oh, I just want to be healthier. That question installs a frame of, let's have a deep conversation, motherfucker. So what you do is you have the deep conversation. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk you through exactly what pulling threads looks like. So if I draw it out for you here, these are threads in a conversation. The threads that you get 4 threads: time, money, freedom, and relationships. Which one is the deepest conversation? I want you to think. The deepest conversation is relationships. Why? Because it impacts the self-image that they have. What's going to cause them to have better relationships, depending on the offer that you're selling, is either going to be fitness or money, basically, depending on the offer that you sell. You have 2 types of self-image. You have internal self-image and you have external self-image. The difference between the two is the internal self-image is how somebody views themselves. The external self-image is how people believe that other people view them. So the most important part for you is to understand exactly how they want other people to perceive them. But firstly, you need to get them to understand how they need to perceive themselves in order to get that outcome. So, for example, if you say, what's the biggest motivation behind you wanting to make money in your business right now? They're then going to say, well, I want to be able to travel, which is going to be one thread, right? Like the freedom aspect. Well, like instead of saying, cool, do you not feel like you can travel now? And going like against the flow of the conversation. They're saying they want something. You're saying, do you not have that? Like you're having two different conversations and you're psychologically in completely two different places. So what you then need to ask them is, okay, cool. At the end of the day, like, why is it that you want the freedom? In what way will your life change once you get the freedom? Okay, and who will benefit from you having the freedom? Now you can start to tie in family. So now you're 4 questions deep, and you can start the next thread off already 4 questions deep because you're following it. They're then going to say, mom, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever. Okay, cool. Let's just say your wife is going to benefit from you having the freedom. How is she going to benefit? Okay, she's going to be able to see me a lot more. The kids are going to be able to be around me a lot more. I'm going to have a lot more time to be able to spend with the kids. Now you've got 3 massive fucking points to push on. You've got time with the wife, time with the kids, time with themselves. Freedom, right? But the freedom is tied into the relationships, and the relationships is tied to the money. So they all can clusterfuck into one extremely deep conversation. So you can be like, okay, well, for your wife and your kids, how is it that you want to provide for them? I want to be able to give them more time. I want to be able to give them more of me. Why is it that you want to do that? Because right now I feel like I'm not showing up for them. Because right now I feel like I can't be able to give them exactly what I need to give them. Okay, what more do you want to give them? I want to give them the true version of me. I want to give them the present version of me. I want to give them the energetic version of me, the one who is not stressed at work, the one who's present in conversations. Okay, why is that so important to you? But do you see how now we're going deeper with the threads? And the most important part is that you're now getting their external self-image. They want them to be seen, they want themselves to be seen as the type of person who's there for their kids, who's energetic for their kids, who isn't stressed from work, and who's present in conversations. So now, the most interesting part about this concept is that you can say, well, in order to provide for your family, boom, who do you first need to provide for? Themselves. Okay, in what ways do you feel that you need to provide for yourself more? Because if they externalize their goals, they're going to externalize the reasons as to why it stopped them. When they externalize the reasons as to why it stopped them, they're going to give you an external objection. Think about it, partner, I don't make decisions like this, okay? So this is how we remove the objections, basically. Now, if we dive into this, then they're going to say, in what ways do you need to provide for yourself more? Well, I just need to be more of an action taker, or I just need to be able to take more risks, or I need to give myself more time, I need to be happier, I need to be X, Y, Z. They're going to tell them exactly, I need to be this. Okay, in what way do you need to be more of that? And now, all of a sudden, you've got like, what's this? Fucking, let's just say 10 questions of depth in terms of the future and where they want to be. So if they're down here, they can now idolize this life up here. So you can ask them, wait, okay, so now Dave, if you're down here, I think we started off with a man, I can't remember if we started off with a man or a woman, but like, let's just say Dave, right? You're down here to be able to achieve this life that you want of the money, the time, the freedom, to be able to have that extra life with your kids. And there's so many deeper threads that you can pull, by the way, but I'm just giving an example. Like, how much money do you need to make to be able to achieve that? Let's just say that they say 20k a month, rather than saying, how much money do you want to make with e-commerce? How much money do you want to make with appointment setting? Like, you need to tie the money to the fucking outcome that they want. When you do that, you're able to make much more impactful conversation than you're having right now. So, if we dive into it, who do you now need to become to be able to earn $20,000 a month? Would you be open to accepting, Dave, that there is a better version of you that exists? Yeah, of course I would. Why would you be open to accepting that? Get him to sell you on the fucking answer, right? This is what we call leaning out, and I'll explain that in a sec. I'll probably explain this whole thing without even really realizing, but when you then dive into that, like, okay, what type of person do you need to become? He's going to tell you what type of person he needs to become. Okay, well, now you've got the future. Now you've got this version of Dave up here, the motherfucker who stands on top of the Lambo looking like a motherfucking beast. The person who throws money off the side of his yacht, who drives around with in a fucking Lamborghini with a $40,000 watch on. So, leaning out. So this is essentially the purpose of pulling threads, basically, right? This is how you get there. So, leaning out, the purpose of leaning out. What is the real purpose behind it? Well, the prospect has to sell you on their goals. They have to get you bought into their mission because you're acting skeptical of them. And when you act skeptical of somebody else, they feel the need to disprove your skepticism. So, simultaneously, you're gaining so much leverage to be able to challenge against their limiting beliefs. The reason why this is important, we'll touch on that in a sec, is because now you can understand exactly what is causing them to not fulfill that gap on their own. Because when you challenge somebody on the right things, the more inclined they are to disprove you of that challenge, like I mentioned before. So future pacing, the ultimate purpose of going through the future first is so that you can build an identity. Identity is the most powerful thing. Like I said, they're going to buy who they want to be, not what program you have to fucking sell. Because with what they want to achieve, that also requires becoming a person that they have not become yet. So you'll save the actual full-on future pacing for later on in the call. Right now, what you're doing is you're just getting data and leverage to be able to actually create a fucking full-on experience for them to live in. But right now, they are not ready to live in that experience yet. And I'll tell you why. You need to future pace them getting out of a situation before you can future base them actually achieving anything. The key part is knowing how to navigate the deep conversation and knowing what threads to pull. Okay, and now based off what I've just explained before, you know exactly what threads to pull. If you don't, drop a comment with a question. What not to do is to stay surface level, obviously, as you can tell, is to ignore language that will block in front of the close. Like, for example, yeah, I feel like, my wife wouldn't really benefit, like, I guess so, or like if they start using like bullshit language, like I guess, maybe, if, but, could, would, should, then it's like, no, that's not what you want. What you don't want to be like, if you don't mind me asking, like that is the worst thing that you can say. You don't want to be stuttering and like asking these deep questions, like Mark, can I just ask you a personal question on this? No. What you want to do is you just want to ask the question direct with chest, because it's not about what you say. It's not about how you say it. It's your intentions behind your words. Because if your intentions are truly to help, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be able to put them in a position where they actually feel like they're being helped. But you don't want to attach it to the outcome. You're not helping so you can close. You're just helping. You're ruining your cycle of reciprocity if you're doing it with a reason attached to it. You're just doing it for the sake of helping. Just be present in the conversation and understand what you need to pull. Most important part. And the quick tip that I had up here, but I already ran over it with you, is like in the future, you need to identify how much money they need to make to achieve being this hardcore motherfucker, basically. Okay? Current situation. Key things that you want to understand. How much money they make now? Because you've already got, well, how much money do you need to make to achieve the future? Okay, well, how much money do you make now? How long have you been making that type of money? The most important thing that you want to understand is what is internally stopping them from achieving the goals that they have set in the future. How long those limitations have been present. Number one thing, the only reason that we really go into the current situation is to understand that. Because then we can go into the past, and I'll explain why. The perceptions and the language that they use in the current situation is going to tell you how they feel about where they're at. Because if you get a high ego motherfucker and they're like, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm going to get there anyway. It's like, whoa, Dave, like no one said that you weren't going to get there. But if you look behind that, right, if somebody says, I feel like I'm going to get there anyway, or I feel like I'm making progress, but you have not insinuated that they're not, then they're feeling a psychological need to disprove. And so it's like, they feel the need to back it up, but there's actually no need to do that, because no one's saying that they're not going to improve. No one's saying that they're not trying to get to where they want to go. They just want to feel comfortable with the fact that you're challenging them, to give themselves a bit of cushion, to make themselves feel, because ego is born out of insecurity, right? What you need to look at is like, are they overcompensating or are they hiding something? What is this person saying between the lines? What are they saying with the words that they're using? Is what they're saying going to get in the way of the close? Like I mentioned a couple of times already, the reason why I re-emphasize that is because it's so fucking crucial to be able to get you to the point where you're making the deal across the line, basically. Okay, if you don't have these three things, you will not close the deal. How much money they make, their internal limitation, and the timeline. Like this is essentially where they're at now, right? Is like they're driving a fucking Vauxhall Corsa, wearing a Casio watch, just getting in self-improvement, trying to give it a little bicep flex, right? So when you understand, okay, cool, they're here, they want to be here, they want to be this motherfucker up here, what is stopping them from becoming this guy internally? What is internally actually stopping you from providing the life that you want to live? Or if you reflect on the last 2 years and we have an honest and genuine conversation, what is internally stopping you from becoming the man that you want to become? What is internally stopping you from getting to 20k a month? Plug that outcome that they want to achieve with the challenge that you're offering. Then you have something tangible to challenge against. It's all linked, right? The puzzle is starting to take place. And so this is all just one big puzzle. So now they're going to say, well, I feel like I procrastinate, I am lazy. They're giving you behaviors and symptoms, right? See, the biggest thing with this is that they're just symptoms. Boom, 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 boom. And what you need to understand is that there's something beneath the symptoms. There's always a cause. The cause is causing them to procrastinate. It's causing them to be lazy. So, for example, if they believe that they would be successful, would they still procrastinate? Would they still be lazy? No. So that means then that the only thing stopping them is what? You guessed it, the lack of belief and the lack of conviction in their own ability to be successful. Now you understand the internal limitation, which is going to be fear, lack of belief, self-doubt, but ultimately the core reason is fear of judgment, and I'll explain why. You have two layers to the brain. You have the authentic self, if you want to call it that, and then you have the ego. The ego is the bodyguard for the authentic self, and the ego creates symptoms of problems. So if somebody's telling you in their business that, oh, lead flow's the issue, well, aren't you the one who owns the business? Okay, well, what is causing you to not solve the lead flow issue? Oh, I just don't have the knowledge, right? And then it's another symptom. Okay, well, you don't have the knowledge because of what? Because at the end of the day, don't we all have the knowledge? Like, we can all go out there and get it. Obviously, I wouldn't say that like that on a call, but like the reason why they're not doing it is because they're scared to fail. Why are they scared to fail though? Because the reason why they're scared to fail is because it's an ego attacking task. No one wants to fail because, again, it affects their self-image, which they feel is going to affect their relationships. And the core human fulfillment is love and joy. That's at the top of the hierarchy of needs, I'm pretty sure. So when you genuinely look at that, right, like, and you go behind the ego and you say, well, what is internally stopping you from solving and going and getting the knowledge? I just don't know where to look. Okay, and if your friend told you that they don't know where to look, what would you tell them to do? I'd tell them to go and look. Okay, so my question to you is then, what is internally stopping you from getting out there and taking as much action as is necessary to get to the result that you want? When you frame it as a question like that, rather than what's stopping you from getting the knowledge, yeah, you can use both, but like when you blow up the question like that, you and your intentions are to draw the fear out of them. They kind of get where you're going with it, right? And they're going to understand. Then you can go behind the ego, destroy this bodyguard, and pass and get to the boss level, which is the authentic self, because now you can go into the past and you can help them understand that this little version of Dave down here is looking at this motherfucker like, damn, he's absolutely balling G. The big thing about the past, right, is like this is where all of the objections are hidden. Whatever has stopped them moving ahead in the past, whatever has stopped them getting the success that they want, will continue to stop them moving forward, because your job is to remove that roadblock, or not even to remove it, but your job is to help them understand that that roadblock's in the way, to bring them to a point of self-awareness where they understand exactly what the issue is. So now when you piece it together, like the ultimate mission is to get the internal limitation. Then when you've got it, it's like you need to help them understand exactly where, why, and how it stopped them. Okay, so where could they be had they faced the internal limitation? Let's say that they have had this fear of failure for the last 5 years. You need to then reframe the fear of failure. For example, a great one that I used to use all the time is like, the fact that you're scared of failure is completely normal, and I want you to understand that. Can I offer you a perspective? Because this fear of failure that you have, when you go to the gym and you push your muscles to failure, what happens to your muscles? They grow. Okay, so if you avoid failure, what else do you avoid? Growth. And so would it be fair to say that in order for you to get to $20,000 a month, you're then going to need to go through a serious amount of growth, which means that you're going to have to encounter failure along the way regardless? Okay, so by you avoiding failure and by you avoiding the growth, who has to suffer because of that? Now you're able to dive in to the fucking pain of what's stopping them, because now they're seeing this huge fucking gap of where they're at and what's actually the problem. So what you're doing is you're actually helping them understand that the fear is not who they are. The internal limitation is not who they're born to be. It's just an outcome of the actions that they've taken. Because you need to put the fear as a third person, because that's all it is. So when you talk about the fear and ask questions around it to get them to understand, like, fuck, why was I letting the fear hold me back the whole time? You can actually be with them against the motherfucking fear. Now, they have even more reason to overcome it, because one, they're not alone, and two, they actually understand that really there's nothing holding them back anyway. All it is an internal roadblock. So how do you do this? A series of deep questions which are going to provoke the existing thought patterns that they have. Thought-provoking motherfucking questions, okay? There's 3 things that this will do. Like I said, provoke the thought pattern. 2, extract pain. And 3, create a new self-image. Because without war, there is no peace. That's why some monks run 1,000 marathons in 1,000 days, because they understand on the other side of that war is a lot of peace that they're looking to find. So timeline, crucial first step. Like I said, how long has it been the case? And then it's like you bring the realization of like, fuck, by asking them what I call the gap stretcher. So if you had faced that fear 2 years ago, what type of position could you be in today? Well, I'd already be earning $20,000 a month. Okay, so let's say that you started earning $20,000 a month 18 months ago. How much money would you have made? 20 times 18 is what? $360,000? Okay, so who would benefit from you having $360,000 in your bank account? Wife, kids, me. In what way would they benefit? Okay, well, ultimately, who then has to suffer because you're not taking the steps that you need to as the man that you want to be? My wife, my kids, me. How do they suffer? How do you suffer? Now, all of a sudden, you're just throwing darts from all angles, and all he can do is like curl up and just be like, do you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to step into the fear. He's going to step through the darts. He's going to step through the pain to be able to get there if you do a good enough job. And this is what I teach all of my students. This is literally the way that I've been able to make so much more money than I've ever made in my entire life. The way that I took Julius from literally $300 in his bank account to over $35,000 in 11 days. So ask emotional withdrawal questions like how, what, why. Like I mentioned before, how do they have to suffer? Why is it that you're willing to let them suffer? I'm not willing. Why are you not willing to do that though? Because would it be fair to say that right now you are? And so when you dig into the emotion, you can do like a small future pacing consequent. Like, how does it sit with you knowing that they have to suffer because you're not taking the actions that you want to take? Yeah, it makes me feel terrible. It makes me feel angry. Angry of who? Angry with myself. boom, spotlights on them. Now you can go into a commitment to change. But before, like I mentioned, right, you want to do like small future based and consequence, where it's like, okay, and if you continue to let this fear and this feeling of frustration and anger grow, what's going to happen to that feeling? It's going to grow. And in what way will that impact you? How will that show up? How will that affect your wife? How will that affect your kids? There's so many threads that you can pull. But you see how now all of the data from the future, all of the data from the current, you can now put huge amounts of leverage on it to go into the past. So commitment to change is one of the most important parts. Moving forward, what makes more sense? X or Y? So this is a simple commitment to change, right? Like moving forward, what makes more sense? For you to continue to avoid the failure, which means that you avoid the growth, which means that your wife and kids still have to suffer? Or does it make more sense for you to actually step into the failure, be the fucking boss that you know that you can, and actually take the step of the man that you want to be? Of course, it makes more sense for me to take the step on the man that I want to be. Now, if you're really fucking good, like me, what you can do is you can drop an identity here. So who is it that you feel has more success? The type of person who avoids failure, or the type of person that steps into failure? Type of person steps into failure. Why is that? Get him to sell you on the answers. Do the lean out, right? Because the more that you lean out, the more he leans in. The more he leans in, the more bought he is. But you can't overcook that shit, so don't lean out too much. The reason why this is so important is because if you actually do this correctly, you can say, well, who is it more important for you to be? For your wife and for your kids and for your family and for yourself, most importantly. Is it more important for you to be X, or is it more important for you to be Y? Is it more important for you to be the man that avoids failure, or is it more important for you to be the man that fucking steps through the failure and shows his kids that he is the guy that he fucking knows he's capable of being? Then boom, commitments change, like I said. Then you go into like a full-on fucking future pace. And a future pace, basically, to give you an idea on it, I'll just zoom into this motherfucker here to explain the future pace for you. The future pace has to, in fact, I'll draw it for you, right? The future pace has to be a combination of things. The future pace has to be a combination of scenery, location, emotion, and reflection. For example, like, let me do it in this example. So Dave, like 6 months down the line, you can be that fucking guy. You can be that dad, you can be that husband, and you can be that man who provides for his family in the way that he wants to, overcomes every single fucking roadblock that he has in his way. And 6 months down the line, you can look at your phone and earn your first $20,000 a month. And you can just breathe. And just look at yourself in the mirror and be so fucking proud of yourself because you know that you've overcame all of the roadblocks. You know your kids look at you as fucking super dad because of all of the actions that you've taken. When you visualize that moment, what emotions do you experience? Okay, and what type of man do you see in the mirror when he looks back at you? Now you got him in the future pace. Now you can flip it to consequence. Now you can close more motherfucking deals. And if you want the exact process that I use and you want me to break this down for you for free, then go to my Instagram and drop me a follow where I will show you exactly how I fucking do that. And you don't even have to pay me anything.